So, hello and welcome to the Young Eager Writers podcast. I'm Michael Evans, and today I'm here with Josie Miller, who is the host of the Write Night podcast and author of many works, her latest of which is Begin, which can all be found on Wattpad. And she also is a content creator, has Patreon, and overall just doing a lot of great things. And I know when you hear this, you probably think she's maybe in her 20s, 30s, but she's actually only 16 years old, which, as we know on this podcast, age definitely is only a number, but it's a number that needs to be stated. So, welcome. I'm happy to have you on. How's it going?
I'm doing good. I feel really flattered, man. Thank you.
Of course. I tried to get as much of I tried to do all your artistic work and everything you put online justice with that introduction. But is there anything I missed? Anything you'd like to share about
No.
yourself?
I mean, a lot of people usually with their writing background, they start with writing novels and usually they move into poetry after that. And I did the exact opposite, and I think you can kind of see that reflected in my work a little bit because I've always been really big on poetry. And then, as I've heard from people who've read my book so far, they really like the imagery that poetry often has is kind of coming in my writing as well. So I don't know. Poetry is really cool, so I do some of that as well.
That's awesome. Poetry, imagery and writing is, I think, one of the major things that in my mind makes a book good besides the characters. And I think poetry is really awesome too. And we can jump right in and talk about that. So, what even inspired you to start writing poetry? And when you started writing poetry, was this just something you always did, or was there a specific age or time in your life when you began?
I don't know. I think definitely when I was younger, I used to be really obsessed with chipmunks. This is really random, but I used to be really obsessed with them because everyone else like always thought that like, oh, I like tigers are these really big animals that were very prominent, you know? And I thought chipmunks were really cool because in nature, they're the ones that actually like rebuild the forest and kind of do stuff like that. And so when I was younger, I would write stories about chipmunks and like actually make their own world around them. And then around the same time, I also started writing poetry. Like I started, I think, in school because they have a lot of school assignments where you have to do creative writing and stuff. But then it kind of grew from there because I enjoyed doing it myself.
Oh wow, that's awesome. So that's actually a really good example of taking, like, I guess a lot of people, well, at least I know, aren't necessarily have the most positive light of school, but at least you took something that you were doing in school and really turned it into a passion of yours, which is super cool. So I know that you have a lot of works on Wattpad. What inspired you to kind of, when you had poetry, did you take your first works of poetry and post it on Wattpad, or was this something where you also, by the way, I pronounce Wattpad a little weird, but just go with it, guys.
I don't care.
But
I don't think there's an official pronunciation for it, so you
I
do
don't think
you.
so either. I always feel weird when it like rolls off my tongue. But I was wondering, like, when did you post your first works here? Did you post any of your poetry here? Like, what kind of was the motivation, and why did you choose Wattpad to be the platform that you wanted to get your writing out into the world?
Okay, so my Wattpad journey's been like really interesting to say the least, I think. So I started off, I think I was like maybe a freshman in high school. I'm a junior now, just for context. And I was just like posting stories that happened in my life. For example, I posted stories about how I went to church with this dude and we spilled syrup like all over the place and it was winter so it like froze and so it was like all over our clothes, all over the ground. We had to like scrape it off with a shovel because it froze so quickly, you
It's
know?
crazy.
And so that's my first book. It was called Flop, Going Through Life One Fall at a Time was like the motto line for it. And I thought I was being funny. And so it was just kind of about getting my background on there first. And I guess the reason I picked Wattpad to answer your question is I have heard of other sites like Quotive, you know, I mean, there's like Amazon Books, which is a very professional platform. And I was not ready for that at like 13, as I'm sure
Yeah.
you can imagine. But with Wattpad, I always felt really welcome there. And I had started reading books on the platform before I posted anything. And so I was like, oh, you know, it's free. I can post stuff. And ironically, Flop, I think, is my most successful book so far, though Begin is really catching up.
Yeah, Begin. I noticed Begin is definitely catching up, and I looked through all your Wattpad works, and I was noticing a common theme of I felt that your work was very comical. I was reading one. This one really stood out to me. It was just laughing at your. You wrote like a whole chapter in one of your works about gab addiction, which probably not not necessarily not inappropriate, but I thought that was beyond hilarious to write about, and that
Yeah.
definitely. I was laughing.
Yeah, I definitely think Wattpad's a really fun platform to entertain, first of all, but like, I definitely think I'm comedian at heart, you know? I wouldn't be surprised if I start making horrible puns throughout this interview just because, you know, I really like to make people laugh and smile, and books kind of can do that in a very more serious way, and they often have a more serious tone. And so I think starting off, I wasn't really comfortable trying to attempt that, so I decided to be more like authentic to myself and just do what I do best, which is make people laugh.
I love that. Honestly, I don't know many people, never mind writers, who have the confidence to, like you just said, to be yourself, like right from the beginning. Like most people don't do that, like at all. Like from the beginning, there's someone that they're not. What
Oh, for
gave you the
sure.
confidence or inspired you to right out of the gate say like, I'm Josie and this is who I am in my work?
I mean, I don't know what gave me the confidence. I actually think high school overall has been really big on building my confidence, not only personally, but in writing. And I think your personal confidence and your confidence in writing kind of go hand in hand for sure.
I would
You
agree.
know? And so, definitely with high school and with all of those things, I kind of ended up learning, oh, if people laugh, you know, they really enjoy that. And I guess as a writer, I did write actually a novel my freshman year. I didn't really finish it though. I got like halfway through and I was like, this is trash, so I'm gonna just like stop. But
Yeah,
it was a really key experience because I really was actually thinking of posting that novel, which was called United We Stand. And I wanted to post that one on Wattpad first and have that be my first work. But then I realized this isn't me. Like it wasn't authentic. And a really big thing on, I think, all social media platforms that gets rewarded and is really important is authenticity. And as a creator, I think that the number one thing you should have in your mind is this what I want to create? Is this true to me and what I believe?
that's perfect. Yeah, that's great advice. Kind of like going on that, I find I know a lot of writers who they might not necessarily know what it is that they want to create. To those people who might not necessarily know what their footing is yet, what their maybe preferred genre is or their voice, what's your advice if they still want to get started writing? What's your advice to them?
Quoting Nike, just do it, man. Like with writing in particular, I didn't know that I was going to ever write a novel. I never thought that I would. In fact, I thought it was impossible for me to do that. And the fact I'm already on my second one and I'm a junior in high school, like that's really insane
Yeah,
feeling. But I mean, as for like genres and all of those labels and stuff, don't worry about it. Honestly, you can get inspired from the simplest things. Like Begin and all of that was inspired by one song, you know, it wasn't this huge thing. It started out very small and yet it grew into a novel. So if you just like practice, man, I think that's key with anything, but writing especially. I've been writing for like, I think around 10 years now, you know,
it's
just
awesome.
grade school essays, more personal projects. It's just a matter of practice makes perfect, or as close as you can get, you know. And
Oh,
so
yeah, for sure.
if you
I
don't
think
know where you're going or what you want to do, just do whatever feels right and it'll just kind of fall into place, I think.
I agree. That's great advice, especially because with writing too, I feel like we're always working towards improving our craft to this level that frankly we'll never reach, but you're not going to ever get there or get even close along that journey if you don't begin. So I think that's really great advice. And jumping on that, you've been writing for 10 years, which is a long time, and you seem to be very committed to the craft. What's your schedule with writing? Do you have a schedule? How many hours do you try to allot to your really creative works?
So I am a student, as I've said before, and so I do have less time than I think a professional author would or anyone like that. And I mean, you're a student, you get it.
Yeah,
So, but as time wise, I'm not really big on word counts, honestly. It's not like I'm gonna do it whenever I feel like it. It's more whenever I have free time and a laptop in front of me, I'm going to write, even if I don't necessarily feel like it. Because I feel like a lot of writers only want to write when they feel inspired. And that's why they never get anything done, is because inspiration usually comes like once a year. You can't get a novel done if you're only working on it for a couple days a year, you know? And so
yeah.
I think I guess my writing schedule or habit is probably like 2 or 3 days a week, you know? A lot of times in class, if I have free time, I'll write, you know, a paragraph or two down. You know, it's
Right.
just
Yeah.
the little pieces that kind of add up over time. I think when people like do a novel, they think it's this one giant task, and it is, but you can break it up into tinier pieces and make it really manageable to fit your schedule no matter what occupation, whatever life you lead.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And I've never heard the advice of writing little paragraphs in time in class, but being someone who like definitely has spent my fair share of time in the public school system, you do have little bits of time, not necessarily every day and certainly not every class, but there's certainly like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there that you can maybe have some extra time after a test or whatever's going on. And that's actually a really good way to kind of pivot things. And I guess, at least for me, that would probably be a way to kind of like take some stress out of the day and have some fun. So I think that's like a really good way to go about it. I've read in multiple places on your website and bio that you want to make a living as a writer, which I share with you in that goal, and I think a lot of people do. When you
Oh,
envision
for sure.
yourself reaching this goal, how do you want to get there?
Oh boy, that's a big question. Gonna have to spill all my secrets of success now, only on this podcast for you guys. But I think for the first part, with making a living as a writer, I don't think you have to be a mathematician to know that the odds aren't on your side. You know, like being a writer and being an author, even after you get with like this huge publishing agency, you know, one of the big five, like it's so hard to actually like make it, even if you get accepted by a publishing agency. But that's not to say you shouldn't try. I think what, well, at least my plans to actually get published is, so right now I'm kind of deciding between traditional and self-publishing, you know, and that's a whole debate, you know. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts about that, and I think I'll know more once I actually get closer to that step. But like right now I'm doing like research on publishing and publishing companies and like advances, agents, all of those fun
Yeah.
things, the more business side of writing, you know. And I definitely have a plan. So with Begin is part of the Spring Day series overall, and it's a 7-book series. I hope, or at least plan, to put all of those on Wattpad, at least my first drafts. And there's a book series that kind of connects with Spring Day, and those I definitely want to be able to physically publish as well as having the first draft on Wattpad, you know? I think the hardest part of being a debut author, whether you traditionally or self-publish, you need to be able to get people's attention. So that's the one thing where Wattpad can really work in your favor, because if it's free and people don't have to pay for it, they're much more willing to give you a try and then vouch for you in the future. Like,
Yeah.
Begin on Wattpad right now versus Begin when it's like finalized and is like an actual book on a bookshelf, they're gonna be two different things. And there's gonna be some added stuff with the book as well. I have things planned for that to add in, you know, as bonuses, and like
Yeah.
eventually, if I could, I'd hire an artist to like draw the characters, and you get one character with each book, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of packaging stuff that I have ideas for, but overall, Patreon is also another step in that direction to actually get money from it. Like my Right Night podcast, every time you listen to it, I actually get like a penny or two, and so that actually adds up over time. You know, I think I have almost like $1 or something now. Publishing is a really, really long journey, you know, and it can be really hard and confusing and scary and all of those things, but you just, once again, like writing a novel, you break it down one step at a time, traditional or self-publishing, whatever you want to do. It starts with taking those little steps.
Be sure to listen to Josie Miller's Right Night on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more platforms. If you're interested in listening to the full version of this interview, you can find it at youngeagerwriters.org.